Imagine spotting a girl getting kidnapped at the side of the road and then realizing later that that was your sister. It was the 26th of February 1970 in Littleton, Colorado. Marilee Burt was a ninth grade student at Goddard Junior High School. Now, she was a beautiful girl, as you can see, and she was also very athletic and talented. She was popular, she had loads of friends, she loved socializing, and she just had a bright future ahead of her. She was a great swimmer and an excellent skier. She also really loved getting involved in after-school activities, and in particular cheerleading. She also had a really lovely, caring family. They were pretty well off and owned some local car sales rooms, and her mum usually actually ferried her to and from her after-school activities. On the day in question, Marilee stayed after school for a basketball game that she was cheerleading at. Straight after this, she went to a nearby friend's house to just kind of chill there for a little bit and wait for a lift. Now remember, this is back in the 70s, back way before we had mobile phones, so Marilee called her mum from a landline from her friend's house and asked for a lift. However, there was a little bit of a miscommunication, and I think her mum presumed that she meant to have a lift from the school, so her mum got in her car and headed on towards the school. But she obviously couldn't see Marilee anywhere because she was at her friend's house. And she couldn't just give her another call and check where she was or text her because there were no phones, so she got out of her vehicle and she went into the school to try and look. But obviously she had no luck, and meanwhile Marilee must have been kind of wondering what was taking her mum so long and decided to just walk home by herself instead. Now, it was a 2-mile journey home, and Marilee only had little legs. She was 5'4", I'm 5'4", and 2 miles would be a nightmare after school. It was also 6:45 by this point, and it was February, so it was getting dark. The decision to walk home rather than to wait at the friend's house would prove to be fatal. Marilee's older brother, Ramon, just so happened to be driving home that day along the same road, and he noticed something. Now, it was pretty dark, like I said, so his vision was slightly impaired, but he saw a girl in pigtails and a cheerleading outfit. He didn't know at the time that this was his sister. He noticed her speaking to a van driver, and he managed to get a good look at this van driver. He was a white male with dark brown hair and long sideburns. But he didn't really think too much of this. Like I said, you know when you're kind of driving home after work or something and you're just kind of in a bit of a daze, you notice things but you don't really think too much into them. Well, he got home after this and realized his sister was not home and that was his sister he'd seen at the side of the road. He got straight back in his car. He thought this was really weird that she would be randomly talking to a man, so he got back in his car, he drove to the exact same spot, and this was only 5 minutes later, but they'd vanished. Ramon was literally, obviously, as you would be, beating yourself up about this. Like, he was thinking, why didn't I just pull over initially when I saw this? But I think it's one of those cases where hindsight is 20/20, and he wasn't to know at the time. Marilee never came home that night, and tragically the following day a horrific discovery was made. The body was found nearby, crumpled up with no clothes on. She'd clearly been the victim of a brutal attack and SA. She'd been strangled to death with rope that was still around her neck. Now, obviously, police seized this rope and they took it off for analysis, but the technology really wasn't very good back then at all. Police also started looking into S-offenders in the area and did identify one man of interest. This was Ronald Bloom. Now, disturbingly, he was a local gymnastics instructor at Marilee's school, and he had a history of S offences dating all the way back to the 50s. Why on earth was he able to be a gymnastics instructor at a school with a history like this? And Marilee, like I said, was very athletic. She was involved in the gymnastics at school, so there's a high likelihood she knew him. In fact, when this man was confronted by police and brought in for questioning, he said something incredibly disturbing. He said he had a problem with picking up young girls and SAing them in his car. The police were absolutely convinced that this was their man. This was the person who had murdered Marilee. But they tested his DNA versus the DNA they found at the scene, and it didn't match. And obviously they were thinking, maybe we've done something wrong, maybe we've made an error here, let's test it again just because we're so convinced. But again, it wasn't a match. They clearly had the wrong guy, despite the disturbing things he'd said in the police interview. Now, I don't know why he's not put away in prison after saying something so disturbing. Testing ruled out at least 7 suspects by 1998, but did not successfully find any matches. Chillingly, this murder case remains unsolved, and over the years they've hiked the reward money up and up and up in the hopes that somebody will come forward. The fact her mum wasn't there at the location to pick her up haunted her for the rest of her life.